When I was young in school, I was fascinated by the universe. I had a very scientific mind. And one question which used to bother me a lot, or I used to think about a lot, was, does space ever end? And if it ends, what's behind the space? Say, you say space ends here, but there has to be something across that. So, where does it end? Where does it begin? And then one day, I was in Kolkata. My sister stays in Kolkata. And I was walking through a bookstore, and I was a voracious reader. I read hundreds of books, and a particular book caught my attention. It's called The Dancing Woolly Masters by Fitzroy Capra. It's a very famous book. And that was my introduction to quantum physics. So it was amazing for a young mind to read all the theories of relativity and Einstein, and you can stop time. There's retro causality. You can bend space and time. And since then, I have read or been in touch closely with quantum physics and neuroscience. So, of course, I did read Ramana, Nisargadatta, did my path. But other part of me was also very much interested, because I think most of the people here who follow Advaita have this logical mind, scientific inquiry mind. So they like, going into that path. So I read a lot of quantum physics, and the most surprising or the most interesting part is a lot of the things in quantum physics, and you all know that on the surface, they match up a lot with what Nisargadatta and Maharishi says. So today we'll go a bit deeper. So it's like a journey. Today we'll go at the end of time, end of space, end of the universe, and we'll see what's there. So before I start, does everyone or most of you know about the double slit experiment in quantum physics? Most of you know. Okay. So I'll start with this, which is a very basic foundation. I'll do it very quickly because this field is so big I could talk for hours, but I'll try to condense it. We understand reality, or Newtonian physics understands reality in discrete forms, like this is solid, this has a property, I can see it, and this does not change if I don't see it. The pillar remains as it is. I see it, I don't see it, it is independent of my observation. Now, an experiment broke that model of reality, completely shattered it. It's called the double slit experiment. What that means is, when you pass photon is the smallest part of light, through two slits, it behaves like a wave. Now, wave is a disturbance. It's not a thing. You have to understand it's a propagation. Thing is a particle, like a tennis ball. So what they saw, that photon behaves like a wave. But the moment they measured or observed one of the particles, from that disturbance, it suddenly became a particle. So this is called wave function duality. I'm not chosen this word duality. See, non-duality, duality, wave function duality. That's the exact word for this. Why duality? So this was discovered in 1900s or even before that. Till now, they have no consensus as to why this happens. There are hundreds of theories. There is Everett's many universe theory, there is Podolsky's theories, there is endless theories, string theories, but no one knows why one thing is both at the same time. So, imagine I give you a tennis ball and I say this tennis ball is solid, but at the same time, this is nothing. Nothing, it's just a disturbance. But the moment you look at it, it becomes a tennis ball. The moment you look back, it becomes a wave function. Kind of, in a very simple term, that is what wave function duality means. A particle is both at the same time. And it takes a particular form when you observe it. So observation is required to turn that wave particle duality into a particle. If I don't observe, is in all the forms. Now, another very interesting concept of quantum physics, which broke my mind at that time, was superposition. Superposition means in the waveform, that particle is everywhere at one time. We say this particle is here, right? Not in quantum physics. Superposition means that particle is occupying all this space at once. It's everywhere. But the moment I observe, it collapses and it becomes here. But till then, it's a waveform. Of course, the classical form, how we logically think about the world, is very different from what or how these particles were behaving. And this created the entire branch of quantum physics, which went deeper into time, space, and then ended up with some of the insights which are very similar to what Ramana, Nisargadatta, or Vedanta has been talking. So we learned about the waveform, particle, duality. So they said, this is just on microscopic level, right? It does not apply to humans. It's just, particles. So there was this guy called de Broglie in 1927. You're nodding your head, so you know about it. Have you read about it? Okay. So de Broglie came up with his own theorem. He said that if there's a waveform uncertainty, things are in a waveform and a particle duality at a microscopic level, even in macroscopic level, that is applicable. And he proved it, and he got a Nobel Prize for it. You can read it up. I'm not making it up. So they say the wave function is not only applicable at a microscopic level, it's applicable at a macroscopic level. What this means is, say there's a tree behind me, right? Right now, I don't know it's in what form. It is in a wave or a tree. It's indeterminate. The moment I look at it, it becomes a tree. The moment I turn back, I again don't know what form it is. That's what quantum physics, the basis starts from there. The calculations and everything, and there are thousands of calculations which point to this aspect. Now, the most important bit here is the observer. Now, classical physics said this is different, observer is different. They have no relationship. Quantum physics says observer is an integral part of the system. The observer is required for the wave function to collapse for things to exist. Without that observer, things cannot exist. So, observer and the observed, they're part of the same system, they're not independent. Now, let's go back to J. Krishnamurti. Observer is the observed. Or you go back to even Ramana's teaching or Nisargadatta's teaching. Consciousness, the observer and the observed arise together. They're not independent. So that's the first analogy we can draw from this very simple experimentation. But it goes deeper. So then they started trying to find out. So they knew that observer is required for any system to function, and observer and observed are very much related. So they wanted to find out, now, how did this observer or this universe come into being? This vast universe with thousands of galaxies, hundreds of planets, this vast space and time. How did it, appear suddenly? This is called cosmology. So there are a lot of theories on cosmology. I'll tell you one theory which is very relevant to non-duality. There's this guy called Williden. He came up with a theory in 1982, I believe. It's called the quantum tunneling theory. What does it mean? Very simply, he says the universe has no prior cause. The universe suddenly appears because the quantum vacuum is unstable and the universe appears without any rhyme or reason from nothingness, spontaneously. Now let's go back to what Nisargadatta used to say again and again. He used to say, your consciousness just appeared. There is no cause for it. He was very clear on this again and again. When people asked him, why is there this manifestation? Why is there enlightenment? Why rebirth? Why renunciation? Why do I have to go through suffering? He said the first thing, the initial thing is uncaused. There's no cause for it. It's acausal. And since the initial thing is acausal, everything that follows is acausal. You cannot put a reason as to why it is happens. It just happens. He calls it the happening. Another concept which is pretty prevalent in Advaita is called play, the play of consciousness. It's just a play. It just happens. There's no rhyme or reason for it to happen. So when I read quantum tunneling theory, I think I read it 10, 15 years back. It was really something which struck me so hard. Like this is a scientific guy with equation coming up and saying everything comes from nothing. That finality, we call it the unmanifest or Brahman or reality, does not need a prior cause. It just appears from nothingness and then goes back. And this is also what Buddha believed in, Buddha talked about again and again. And then they try to, so the quantum physicists, they try to go back and try to see, when did it all begin? So they started going back. So if you take Einstein's, I'll go a bit deeper, sorry if I get a bit dense. If you take Einstein's theory of relativity and pull it back, you go back through it, you come to a point 14 billion years in time where everything becomes a singularity. Like time and space collapse there. And that's what they call the Big Bang. That's when things then, started happening. So Hawkins and Hart in 1987, they were not very convinced with the concept of time. So we were talking about space and consciousness. Now we're talking about only time. So what he did, he said, time does not seem to be linear to me. He took time as one of the dimensions. So you have X, Y, and Z axis, time becomes another dimension. It's called spatial time. Once he did that, something amazing emerged, which all the sages have been saying for 2000 years. He came to the conclusion, and the paper comes, it's called the no boundary theory. They come to the conclusion that time is created after the universe. So time emerges from the integrate geometry of that singularity. It is not independent. We think time is independent and then the universe came into this time. No. Once the universe comes into time, that's when time starts. So there is no way you can talk about time prior to it. Now, Ramana, Nisargadatta, everyone has talked again and again that, and that has been my experience as well, that time and space arise from consciousness. So first there is this unmanifest with no qualities, nothing. And then suddenly, there's this consciousness, I am, and with this I am comes the world and time and space. So logically, I cannot talk of time here because actually that time is missing. I'll give you a very good example. All of you must have played video games, right? So say you load up a screen of a video game where there is a character, and the character is, say, in a jungle or a river or a palace. Now, before you switched on the video game, where was that character? Is it possible to know where the character is before switching on the video game? Because the character is part of that rendering, that environment. Once that environment renders, then you can see the character and you can say that this is where the character is, right? Before that, there's no character as such. It's just bits here and there, in the hard drive. This is very similar to time. and it's a little difficult to explain, but I'll try my best. Before consciousness comes in, the device, so think of consciousness as a game screen and the ultimate as a video game. So, unless you see the screen, you see the character, there is no character, right? Similarly, once consciousness comes in, then time and space will come in. But if there is no consciousness, you cannot speak about time and space. That is the reason they talk about that being completely beyond descriptions, beyond attributes, beyond this and that, and beyond time itself. So Stephen Hawking, with his calculation, came to that place where he said, here time breaks down completely. And from here onwards, beyond this, is something which is beyond time itself, because time has not been born. And Nisargadatta would call it timelessness. Ramana calls it timelessness. And then they tried to find out a bit more about, the nature of the universe and the observer and consciousness. And here there's another guy comes in. His name is John Wheeler, a brilliant scientist. He was the one who coined the word black hole. So he was with Einstein. He came up. So after years, so these are guys who were not meditating in a cave. They were in conferences, they were running through equations, they were reading these books and professors and coordinating and running, extreme tests and, all those equipments, etc. He came up with a theory called participatory theory. And his understanding was, and he was very clear, that universe, everything is participatory, meaning you need consciousness and an observer for this universe to exist. So, before I read Nisargadatta, what was my mindset of reality? There is a universe and I was born into it. My parents were born and I was born. Now, and many of you who've read Maharaj or Ramana for the first time, and you went and he says, no, it's the opposite way. You were not born into the universe. The universe is born into you. You create the universe. So he completely changes the relationship of yourself and the universe. So classical, I'm born in the universe. Advaita and quantum, you create the universe. It's a participatory experience. Without you, there cannot be any universe. And when I first read Nisargadatta, I said, what is he talking about? Like, how is it possible for someone to create? The universe is vast and, full of stars and galaxies and everything. And I'm just a person sitting down here. What does it even mean to create the universe? And this in Advaita is called Drishti Shrishti. There's a particular term. Drishti means eye, Shrishti means creation. So what it means is creation only happens when you observe it. So what Maharaj had said again and again, and what has been my experience, is the universe and I come together in a flash. They come like this and they come together. There cannot be a universe without the eye. And when the eye sets, the universe sets for you. Because you cannot come up and say there is a universe anymore. Once you go, who will certify that there is a universe left? And can you verify that certification? You cannot. Because the device with which you want to ascertain it is existing or not is missing, it's gone. And this is what I experience. So there are levels of dissolution. There's a level of dissolution of the I. And then there is a level of dissolution where the witness dissolves. So I dissolves and witness dissolves. And then finally the consciousness itself dissolves. And this is where I think Nisargadatta's teaching was the most abstract and the most penetrating because no teacher talked about this state. They might have mentioned it in briefs, but Nisargadatta went very deep into this particular aspect of consciousness and beyond, prior to consciousness. His books, you have a book called Prior to Consciousness. What does prior to consciousness even mean? It means a state like the video game where nothing is booted up. The I is not there. I am not there, right? Then what remains? We think everything ends, but everything does not end. There is something which remains even after the dissolution of consciousness. But you cannot explain it. You cannot put it in words. You cannot describe it because all descriptions are part of this consciousness. Like I said, beginning of time. If time has not begun, how can we talk about where it is? It has to begin for us to talk about it. So Maharaj, in his later works, Nisargadatta was very. Have anyone read the later works of Nisargadatta? Seeds of Consciousness, Prior to Consciousness? No? Experience of Nothingness. So if you read those books, those go a step deeper. He's not talking about I am. In I am that he talks more about I am as a doorway. Be in the I am, be in the I am. In the later works, he says, okay, I am is there. What happens when the I am and the consciousness itself sets? When the instrument is gone, how will you register anything? And who will be there to register it? And that non-dual state, that unmanifest state, I call it unmanifest. For a lack of better word, any word cannot capture it, is actually prior. And I now understand why Maharaj used that word. Maharaj was very clear. He didn't use the word transcending consciousness. He used a particular word prior to consciousness. Prior means like that video game where nothing is booted up yet. It's a blank state. Nothing. That is prior. When manifestation comes in, it's like the video game, all consciousness, manifestation, things have come and you're playing a character and going around. And Nisargadatta was trying to take you or trying to make you understand of that state which was prior to this consciousness arising. Now, the confusion which generally happens, and I went through this confusion for a very long time, I just could not understand the difference between consciousness and prior to consciousness. In fact, it took a lot of time for me to understand what is consciousness. So what is he talking about? What does consciousness even mean, And once you understand that, then you go a step further and he says, now he's taking me a step further. He says, even consciousness is not real. Not real in the sense, it's not the final thing. There's something beyond consciousness. This is where space-time breaks down. This is where all equations break down. So quantum physics goes till the singularity. And at singularity, all the laws break down. Time breaks down, space breaks down. There's nothing to hold on to. And the equations just say, okay, we just can't go beyond this. But the sages and those, and even you all can do it, if you investigate, you will be able to see or understand or experience that state which Ramana talks about. So, for those who have not read deeply Nisargadatta, I'll give you a small thing which he talks about a lot and which I practice a lot. He says, say, you exist, right? So, you exist. Since when do you exist? From your first memory. If you think logically, my first memory is when I know I exist. Forget about being born and whatever parents say. For me, my self existence starts from my first memory. My first memory is I'm driving a small bicycle. I'm a young boy, I'm driving bicycle, I'm happy, my parents are there. That's my first memory. Now that's when I came into existence for me. A second before that, nothing. A year before that, nothing. A billion years before that, nothing, nada, no, because this instrument was not there. And then suddenly I'm here. And with me, it's the moment I'm here, the world is here. It's very easy to see, you see. The moment you open your eyes, you're here, the world has to be here. It comes together. So what is this miracle? From nothingness, how did something come? And then, of course, there's a quantum physics theory on this. It's called something from nothing. And what this theory talks about is they call it the quantum vacuum. So, quantum vacuum is empty, but it is full. So, everything is paradoxical in quantum physics. So, it's empty, but it is full of particles and they are in different states. And in this quantum vacuum, things appear out of nothing and they dissolve back for no rhyme or reason. Very similar to, I was not there and suddenly I'm here without any effort. Like if you go back to that first memory, which is very interesting, before that, it's actually a complete blank. There was no effort on your part. There was nothing. You were not even there. Forget about effort. And then suddenly you're here. That transition from nothingness to beingness. That's what Nisargadatta used to call the first miracle. I have become self aware. I am here. I exist and the world exists. And used to ask in the later works to try and find out what was there before your first memory. Did you exist? Were you not there? Were you there? And Ramana pointed it out in a different way. He went through the route of who am I? So when you go inside, you ask a question, it will slowly take you back to the source again. And with that source is this vast field of consciousness. I call it the vastness, immensity. They call it the quantum field. It's full of probability. It has got everything. Things appear in it, they disappear in it. It's not fixed. You can't say it's like a waveform. So you can't say it's a particle or where it is or what it is, but it is. And from that field, that awareness, that totality or potentiality, everything comes into being. The first time I experienced this ground, I call it the ground of being or totality, immensity, but ground of being is how I experienced it. I was in my hometown at that time. I think you know that place, when you go towards Rajganj, you have that barrage, a bridge. I was walking through near that bridge and suddenly I had this, I'm trying to put it in words. There was this huge field of being and I could see everything arising from it, everything dissolving like a eternal play, things coming up, forming, going down. And that field itself was untouched. That field, though it gave birth to everything, it itself was unchanged all the time. And in quantum physics, they call it the quantum field. In Vedanta, we call it the Brahman, the potentiality or the field from which everything happens. So there is another theory of how the universe was formed or is formed. It's called the holographic theory. What it means, a very, very interesting theory, our universe is a projection from a black hole. It's a projection. Mark the word projection. This word is used again and again and again in Advaita in different forms. It's a projection, it's a projection. So the world is a projection, a 3D projection from a higher dimension of a black hole. Higher dimension of a black hole. The language is so mystical, but it is actually a quantum physics language. They use this language to describe it. So it's a projection, three-dimensional projections from a higher dimension of a black hole. What is a black hole? You have no idea about it. You cannot describe it. It has no attributes. It has no properties. Time breaks down, space breaks down. Similar to Parabrahma, very similar description. So black hole is like the Parabrahma, and it projects the Brahman, the entire manifestation. And this projection happens cyclically. It goes in and then comes out, and for no rhyme or reason. So the physicists have tried to find, the eternal question, who am I? Where am I from? Where is this universe from? Was something prior to the universe? How was it always like this? Or was it something different in the beginning? And they converge to equations which say that this universe is uncaused. It comes from nothingness, which is highly counterintuitive. But this is the same thing which, if you see the Vedas or Upanishads talk about again and again, that final reality is unknowable. Unknowable in the sense you cannot define it. You cannot say this is what it is, because the moment you say it, it's gone. You cannot capture it.